Okay, what's going on, guys?
Oh, living the dream, as usual.
I'm just glad to be alive after last weekend.
Yeah, so I had kind of I went and hung out with my old chief from my old unit yesterday. He decided he wanted to do a barbecue and stuff, and so we got to talking, and I kind of brought up to him what some of our topics for today was going to be. And so we happened to brush on one because I thought it had everything to do with his mentality when it comes to technology and hell, just social media platforms in general.
Yeah.
So, when we were getting geared up to leave, he would always tell us, "Hey, go find out what you're looking for on that Google box of yours, or go to the Amazon, or go to the Google." It's the way he would say it.
Right.
And anybody that is with that unit that ever hears that will be able to hear his voice when I say that. So anyway, we were talking about kind of the evolution of technology and who adopts it and who doesn't. And I wanted to kind of get his perspective on how what technology he uses, what technology he doesn't. And because he was like the perfect example of somebody who resists technology, either A, because he doesn't know how it will benefit his life in some way, and he's waiting for somebody to come along and explain it to him, or the opposite, which for me, back when I was married, my parents were way ahead of me when it came to technology because of their handicap. Technology really benefited the deaf community.
Sure.
With the pagers that texted out and just computer usage in general, and video became a very big thing. So now, their world got a lot smaller when technology came in, as nothing was too far for them to get to.
Well, that's very cool.
Have y'all had any kind of experiences like that?
Well, I don't know if I've had anything to that level, but I can just relate to my in-laws and other people that are aged. My mother-in-law and stepfather-in-law fought phones. They wanted flip phones. They didn't want a smartphone.
Right.
And so for them, they never wanted to get on the internet. So if they had to do something on the internet, my wife and I would have to go do it for them because they just wouldn't jump on the technology. Mm-hmm. There at the end, they ended up getting smartphones but never used any of it. So I always thought it was funny to see how some people grasped the technology,
right,
and actually would interface with social media like Facebook and all these other social media events that people would get onto, but they just completely would not touch it. They felt, one, I don't think they just felt comfortable with the interface, and two, they just felt like, you know what, this is for young people.
Right.
So it's funny to see the contrast between the needs of your parents and their lack of, or my family's lack of desire to even touch the stuff.
Right.
Which I think it's funny.
My dad feared it. It was a constant struggle with him when he was around to get him up to speed. He resisted it completely. It was just a struggle constantly. So I was always over there helping him figure out,
I remember you talking about
it was a level of frustration for me that was up there. It was a big stress-induced labor of love when I would go over there and help Dad.
So did he ever identify what the struggle was? Or
The fact that he just hated it. The fact that we were here, and he came from, he was a salesman. He's always been a salesman. He's had his own companies since I can remember.
Right.
And he's primarily the salesman. And he's the guy that would pick up the phone, and he would call you, and he would expect you to answer the phone. If he was calling you to buy a product, he expected you to have all the answers, to be able to stay on the phone, give you the answers right then and there. Whereas today's technology, you might have to go look something up. It's all PC based. It's all sitting on a server somewhere. It's in a file. Mm-hmm. It takes people time to find exactly what information that you're calling and looking for. And he just didn't have the patience for that. It should all be up in your head, and this is how it is. I mean, it was very old school. It's very 1960s. This is how things got done. So bringing him into the technology of where you can have everything at your fingertips,
right,
was just not something that he was. He just resisted it completely.
Well, it's funny you say that because I remember, I think it was Einstein said, why should you commit memory to things you can quickly reference?
Right.
Which fits right into the modern technology age.
Okay, that's a great...
You know, you look at that and you say, okay, I get it. Back then you had to memorize all that stuff. But you had many companies with many people in them. Now we live in a day where there's fewer companies with many more product lines.
Right.
And so I can see where that transition from his style of doing business made this huge shift and just left him behind.
I mean, being able to print and stuff like that, he got that, but it was the whole searching things in a database just drove him berserk.
So,
and he never could get it.
So where this conversation went with Chief is, I had to get him to kind of expound on some of the things, because the things that he resisted back in, prior to 2012 are not things that he would tell you today that he resists. So he's not afraid to get onto the internet to go look up whatever it is that he's looking for, only because he's built up a comfort to do that. And like we were talking last night, is I said, basically, in some capacity, you've now become your own subject matter expert when it comes to trying to retrieve information. Because if you're constantly relying on somebody else to fill in the blank that you have, well, then you'll just become irrelevant until somebody comes along and answers that box for you. So it's like, you better be either self-sufficient or you're going to die away, which was exactly the conclusion that he arrived at yesterday. So I would say that your father and Chief, at some point, they were merged on one message until a light sort of went off with Chief, and now he'll take technology off in bites.
Yeah. And
whatever he doesn't understand, he'll either refer back to myself or some of the other guys from our section about, why do I want this? Right. How will it help me? Because he's looking at it, trying to figure out, okay, this is my life, and how does knowing this particular technology help my life? He's
no different. That example is no different than a parent. It really isn't, because when you have a parent that doesn't want to use technology, you usually have kids in the house that use technology.
Right.
When you can't program the microwave, who's the first one you call? The kid.
Right. The kid.
Hey, can you set the clock on this? Or when you're looking up something, can you go to that Google or that Amazon and can you look this up for me? So so what ends up happening, as more mature people become empty nesters,
right,
they're basically going to have to start relying on that technology and the use of that technology. So it's a good it's natural transition.
But I think you have a generational gap to where somebody like me, when I get to that age, will probably be used to the change and how technology moves. That was one of the things that frustrated my father, was change inside of technologies. Let's take YouTube for an example, just as a quick example. Mm-hmm. If he was used to searching YouTube a certain way and then they just moved the search box, it would drive him insane.
Sure.
So the rapid change of technology, I think, is what kept him from adopting it. You know what I'm saying? If he feared it from the perspective of, I'm going to have to learn something new every time I get into this. I can't do it repetitively and go to the same place every time. I think that's what drove my dad nuts, and where Chief probably is able to adapt. My dad was just never able to make that adaptation.
Because he realized that if he didn't, he was going to die.
Exactly.
And that's how he equated it to me last night, which I was like, you can come to an exact resolution real fast. If I don't do this, this is going to happen.
Sure.
I don't want that to happen, therefore I'm going to do this.
Right.
Well, and the big thing for our generations, our age groups, is collectively between 40 and 57, somewhere in there.
Right.
We grew up with Commodore 64, Ataris. We grew up with progression of games.
Sure.
And so the progression of games and game consoles kept us moving, because we were playing games. So as the technology developed, we were following it because we were playing the games.
I've been doing this since I had like I told you last time when we talked about this, I had my first computer at 14, and I was into it well before that. I mean, I was working on computers at 10, 11, 12.
I didn't get on a computer until I had a job. Okay, I actually went to school to learn.
How old were you?
I was like 21.
Wow.
Okay.
I might have played Atari and
we're around the same
like
age, you and I, at that one. Yeah.
But I didn't get on what I consider to be
a desktop
machine until I was like 20 or 21, and I was going to school to learn Lotus 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, there was no Windows.
Sure.
Or at least not in the platform that people know it now.
Right.
I think my first one was a Commodore 64.
Yeah, I had a buddy that had a 64.
Cassette tape drive in it.
Yep.
Yeah, that thing was slow.
5 1/4 floppies, all that good
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh yeah.
So, but like, you know, number one is talking about this. You know, it's not an endorsement or an assault on social media or technology, but I think it's more of it's kind of reflective of how far we've come as it relates to adopting new ideas and how to do things.
Well, it's funny because we were talking earlier, just prior to sitting down to record, about big technological leaps, and we were talking about the railroad.
Right.
How the railroad expanded to the west and all the things that followed it. I mean, if you think about it, you have the need. People are trying to expand and they're trying to grow horizons and become successful and profitable in this new land. Well, they had to have conveyance, so they get the railroad there. So what followed the railroad? Telegraph. What followed telegraph? That was then commerce. And then all of a sudden cities would start building up and you had to get supplies to these cities. And what a lot of people don't realize is in the early days, these catalog salesmen, if they had the means, they would transmit their order over telegraph to the nearest biggest city,
Right.
and pick it up.
Think about how much faster that was for them.
Yeah, it's just amazing how even though that we haven't lost touch with that original technology.
The concept is the same.
Concept the same. We just got more sophisticated with the ones and the zeros, and now we get them there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's an amazing analogy. If you really look at it, it's no different. You've actually gone from an analog system to a binary system, and that's really the only technological change that I can see that's any different.
Now, to piggyback off of your railroad concept, is if you take that, you know, the concept of the railroad is moving something from point A to point B. You know, as technology evolves, you know, it went from, you know, writing on paper and smoke signals and whatever to now where we're at computers, then we had email, and all of a sudden we had the internet, and now we've got these social media platforms. So you've got whole families scattered across the United States. So the way for you to relay information between family members at one point was, you know, sending a letter, and then, you know, when somebody got an email address, you're able to, you know, send stuff almost in real time.
Right.
So now with, you know, Facebook and all the other platforms out there that are strictly there to convey information, whether it's pertinent or just informational or just for display, you know, whatever it is, I find that there's value in it. Plus, it's just the evolution of technology.
Right.
You know, there are lots of people out there that resist being on Facebook for a myriad of reasons. You know,
or any social media.
Yeah, because of the recent advent with, you know, Facebook and privacy issues, and, you know, for some people it's not an issue. Some people it is.
I think the generation that it's an issue for is dying out. I don't think that'll. I think you're going to see less and less people that have a resistance to.
Yes.
Well, it'll force you to clean up your activities.
It will.
If anything, you'll be a smarter user.
That's true.
You would hope you would become a smarter user.
You'll either sharpen the knife or you'll get used. One of the two.
One of the two.
So it's you know, with those different platforms. I mean, from my own personal experience, my family uses it heavily because we can all kind of exchange information about what's going on in our own lives.
Sure.
Like my most recent kind of revelation or discovery was one of my cousin's children had recently enlisted in the Army, and I happened to just find it by accident, which prompted me to kind of text him to see where he was at in the pipeline, and I was able to impart some information to him about what to expect in his career coming up and what to look for, what to avoid. You know, which I'm relying on I took technology and used it in a way that was beneficial for myself and my family member.
What was funny is you mentioned earlier about cave paintings. We talked about pops clicks.
Yes.
Turn into phonetics, then turn into pictures.
What was it? The progression of social media.
That's right. And what's interesting about that, we're talking about a technology that gets faster and more affordable. But what it's also created is a new language style, because we've gone from words to hashtags to now emojis and pictures.
Right.
So instead of saying, "Oh, that was funny," you just send a smiley face.
Right.
Or, "Oh, that had me crying," you send an emoji with crying. So
because spelling was so hard.
So well, that's what's so funny about it. So our nature is to always make things go faster and easier and more recognizable.
And commerce is not lost on this for sure. You know, when you really look at the commerce aspect of technology and its use, that to me is where the leaps and bounds have really been made. Looking at companies like Amazon who have taken advantage of it, and gotten us to this point.
Well, we talked to the roots of that earlier about the early catalog salesmen.
Sure.
The Sears, Montgomery Ward's, J.C. Penney's.
Started out as the lone town mercantile store to now what you have.
Right.
Yeah, these guys would travel in wagons. They would basically bring stuff from the home store, and St. Louis is typically where this would happen when you're expanding to the west. And they would load up a wagon full of pots and brushes and materials and take them to all these towns and sell them.
Right.
And then that expanded into, well, we'll leave a catalog now. So they would leave a catalog, and you can order from a mercantile. They would send their order in either telegraph or through mail service. Then your order would show up weeks later at the mercantile, and you'd come pick it up. I mean, that's how it all started.
Well, and you had companies like Montgomery Ward's that took advantage of that. You know what I'm saying? They really founded that. If you think about it, companies like Montgomery Ward's that you were talking about.
J.C. Penney's,
right.
Sears.
Yeah.
So you have, they were able to seize on that and last 100 years. But it's funny, when the turn of the century hit this time, they didn't grasp the concept.
Yeah, they missed it. They missed it
how they
completely.
just died off completely. Very few caught on to that. And like I was pointing out to you a while ago, Walmart. I know it wasn't. They're not as old as Montgomery Ward's, but they started out as a brick and mortar store. But they got smart. They realized that they're gonna have to engage in the data game to stay relevant. And now their online sales match about what their stores do.
And you know what? To that point, it makes me wonder if Walmart was able to make that leap more successfully because they had maybe people from that demographic in place that would let them know, hey, this is where
they just got lucky. I mean, whoever was there, they seized on it. They saw it. Whoever was there saw it and seized on it.
See, what ended up happening during that era was that you had a company that was emerging as Made in America.
Right.
Small.
Yeah.
They were all small town America, made in America,
yeah.
made in USA.
That was their logo.
And so that was how Sam Walton established his business. But he also worked for a mass merchandiser, and he found a better way to make this work, and he wanted to spread it out amongst all these communities.
Right.
Well, when the Sam Walton era went away and the technology era started to kick in, Walmart learned the hard way as well. Even though they had the advantage of watching what Sears and Penney's and all these other people did, they had the ability to sit back and try to learn from those mistakes. Unfortunately, they still had to spend money on physical resource.
Sure.
So when you look at the transition, are they transitioning? Probably. But now you have the advent of the internet and internet sales. Mm-hmm. It started with eBay and then Etsy, and then now you have Amazon, which is the $740 billion gorilla sitting in the corner that's just hammering on these guys. And the big question is going to be, can Walmart actually keep up with that?
Where Walmart got smart, in my opinion, is when they came up with the ability to order groceries online, because it's one of their mainstays now is their grocery department. Their prices are good. So now I can order my groceries online. I can drive up to the door and pick them up. Now, granted, there's other services that are on the internet you can do that with, but I think Walmart has kind of pioneered that. They got their name out there first in doing that.
Well, Randall's actually, back in the day, Randall's and Apple Tree had...
Green Pod?
Something like that. Green Pod. They had that before.
Yeah.
Now, the difference between the two is going to be this. The users of social media are used to now using that format. So back then, they were way ahead of their wave.
Right.
What they did was they had a great idea, but they missed the consumer.
That, and I think they probably didn't market it the way Walmart marketed it.
Well, they tried. They spent Peapod. That's what it was called, Peapod. They spent millions of dollars, because I remember we were contributing programs to that system. The problem was the consumer was not willing to order online.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we weren't there. If you think about
Yeah.
it, that mentality probably
Yeah.
wasn't there yet.
That
wasn't
truly
there.
was an idea that was ahead of its time.
Way ahead of its time. And they just missed the wave, just blew them over.
Wow.
So it's funny how that works. So here's what happens, though. People that were in that business during that era just transitioned into these new positions
Yeah.
with these great ideas.
Yeah.
And so, when you're sitting there and you're a guy that has all this money and all this financial backing, you can now go out and hire that expertise.
That's true.
And you can sit there and say, hey, this guy used to work on this program. When you see your resume, says I was one of the developers of Peapod, hey, we need to talk. And fly you in and sit there, and this is where these businesses start.
Well, the same thing with AdWords. Sticking with the technology thing, look at advertisement. AdWords started out on the guy with Lycos.
Yeah.
And it went nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
That guy, man, he had a genius idea and had to ride that thing for so many years. And then who came in? Microsoft came in,
Right. Google
came in, and they basically adopted this guy's technology. It ended up being a big lawsuit that it was pretty interesting to watch go back and forth on.
It's funny because I remember this is kind of an over exaggeration, but there was more search engines than there were websites.
That's true.
That was true, though.
Because one of my all time favorite search engines to use a long time ago was Alta Vista.
All Vista,
And
yeah.
I loved, and I want to say that somebody said that actually sort of what emerged to what is now Google.
It is.
So
A lot of the same guys started out in Alta Vista.
Do you think, though, a lot of that search engine was also the internet lottery? I mean, you got a bunch of dudes that sat in a garage and said, I can develop this and then sell it.
Yeah.
And make millions and get out of it. So that was really the foundation of the barbarians at the gate kind of thing, or the pirates of Silicon Valley. I'm sorry, that's the one. Where everybody was sitting there developing all these great software ideas in hopes of selling them. Because you had guys like, what's his name from Microsoft? Bill Gates. Buying up all this stuff. And so, you kind of look at that, and why not roll the dice on that? You got all these MIT grads and all these smart kids coming out of school writing code. I mean, if you wrote code at a time, you were writing your own paycheck.
Yep.
right.
So, I mean...
that was the ability to print money.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
just print your own check at that point.
And as things speed up and information gathering is gigantic, I mean, look at the data centers now.
Yeah.
They're acres. They're not like square feet anymore.
Oh,
they're
no,
acres.
No, yeah, they're acres.
Having worked in one, that is probably one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in my entire life. It's just a giant room full of server rack after server
See,
rack.
you guys both come from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
industry. Yeah.
There are things that I like about it, but when you get into like the nuts and bolts of it, oh my God, it's just, it's neat technology, but when you're there day in, day out, I mean, there are things that you see behind the scenes that, this is the reason why the internet works the way that it does. You don't get to see the bumps in the road,
Right.
all the things that we used to encounter with these servers. But
It's pretty amazing, though. It is when you see it for the first time, you're like, I can't believe there's this much information. The ability and it would just be one room out of 20 or 30. Just the amount of
And you're only in one spot.
Exactly.
There's many locations.
Exactly.
yes, that's what I said.
Yeah.
The best way to look at it is these server farms are libraries connected to other fucking libraries.
Right.
It's
And so
amazing.
The wealth of information that flows between these sites is just astounding.
It is amazing.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. I mean, and so you sit there and you look at it, and so you say, okay, so now we're shaping the consumer. Okay, so they basically now have said, look, they've put a lot of brick and mortar businesses on notice with this. Because it used to be you'd always want to go try something on.
Right.
Okay, well, they've made it so easy to return things now that if you order something from Amazon, you don't like it, they'll send you a label, you ship it right back, and you get something else.
Right.
I mean, it used to, you'd have to get in your car, go to the store, you better have your receipt.
Well, the reason they make it easy is because they want you hooked on it.
Exactly.
They don't want to make it difficult for you, because then you will say, "Screw this, I'm going to a brick
Yeah,
and
see,
mortar."
I told you the internet doesn't work.
Yeah.
Don't buy anything on the
Well,
internet.
now so that sort of is it's actually kind of an unfriendly description of what businesses actually do.
Sure.
So to become more personal, you'll have like Sears, Walmart. They all have their own like Facebook pages, Instagram, maybe not necessarily Twitter, but but they're on other platforms to present themselves as just regular folks.
Right.
Hey, I'm
Sure.
I'm interacting with my immediate community to see, hey, this is what's going on here, and this is what's going on in my other location. So that kind of humanizes them in a way, versus being just seen as just the brick and mortar place.
Oh, absolutely. You look at anybody that live streams when they have events at their stores, they'll just live stream it. What a great way to get people to say, look, see what you're missing?
Not
You
only
gotta
that,
come on out.
you see people buying and you want to
Sure.
buy too. You know what I mean? That's one of
Sure.
the beauties of that is.
Well, we all want to be a part of that.
Exactly.
You
You,
know?
want to feel included. It's an inclusive thing that attacks the human and the subconscious, I think.
It's funny because we talked about this, was it either last week or week before, about going to a ball game, why we
Right.
don't go into public places, and your and mine's apprehension towards that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm the first one, when I see something online that looks interesting, I'm buying it.
Yeah. Right.
I'm all over it just to try it out because I don't have to leave.
Right.
It comes to my door. And I do like that aspect of that technology.
No, I agree.
Now, when it comes to like just looking at this podcast as what we're trying to do right now, we rely heavily on social media to let people know of our existence. So, that is a huge undertaking. I thought it was just a simple matter of just going to all these different media platforms to kind of give them updates on what's going on with our podcast, to look forward to new episodes. And I never realized just how kind of a management hassle it is, constantly trying to, kind of, so to speak, keep our name on the tip of somebody else's tongue, or make sure that I'm an interest that they want to go look into.
Keeping it in front of somebody's
yes,
face.
and that's a tough job.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at models, when you start looking at improvement models, there's that one called constant and never-ending improvement. And that is like at the speed of thought.
Yeah.
It really happens at the speed of thought. You're not held up by technology at that point. You're held up by your imagination of using what technology is available.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people either make or break their business. Getting outside of that box, saying, you know what? It's got limitations, but we can get around that. And they do. I'm going to post a video on there. That first guy that did that, I mean, nobody really knew. That wasn't planned. We're going to make this where you can post a video.
Yeah.
That happened. That just happened. And so all these leaps in technology come from use.
Yeah.
It comes from use, and in somebody saying, okay, I've reached the limits of this technology now. What can I do to make the next change?
Right.
And that's what I love about this stuff. For me, I'm a curious George. I like puzzles.
Absolutely.
And that transition's coming faster and faster
Oh, yeah.
and faster. That's the thing that's really killer, is watching the speed with which technology evolves now. Used to, you would have years in between technological advancements, then you would be maybe a year to the next technological advancement. Now you can be days out. It's amazing the amount of speed that travels between the gaps.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I watched a great documentary not too long ago. It was a professor from India, and he was talking about the perfect solutions. Like if you got a computer that makes calculations correctly every time, how much time does it use? But what if we let it make a 0.5% error? How much faster would it get?
That's true.
Think about that.
Oh,
Exponential growth, right? So he was introducing this thought. I can't remember his name. I wish I could, because I'd love to give him credit for it, because it was a great idea. Unless it come to launching a space shuttle or an airplane.
Right. Then you don't want
You don't want that
0.5%
creep in there. Unless it's some kind of fuzzy logic creep somewhere that is doesn't have any consequence. But I just don't see that happening.
Right.
But what I think is what's more interesting is when you watch where we're going with this technology. Okay, we're talking about all the good, and we've talked about some of the bad in the past as well. You're talking about a company, we'll just say Amazon, for example. They're big on data analytics.
Data collection.
Yeah, data collection and analytics. And that's that big spooky monster that a lot of people don't really know is lurking out there. Well, they do now because of the trials with Facebook and the privacy. But now you're looking now at people making decisions on what people like based on this information. It could be demographics, it could be whatever it is. And they're looking at the users that don't use, the non-users, I hate to say it, but they're not going to be here very much longer.
Yeah.
Right.
So for them, they're not worried about that group catching up.
This is like the automobile at the turn of the last century. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, people are going to quit riding horses for the most part.
Right.
Well, they're going to do it for pleasure, but not for necessity. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Other than the rodeo.
Yeah, because, I remember when this all first started, it really got started with healthcare. They wanted to get medicine to the elderly on a timely basis without them having to do anything.
Right.
So that was really, from the back of my mind, some of the earliest delivery systems was basically through the medical industry. How do we get medicine to people in a timely basis without them having to always call or mail in a check?
Right.
So that was where the whole credit card and online thing. And just prior to the beginning of this, we watched a pretty interesting video on a company. It's called Zipline.
Right.
That's launching medical supplies via drone to remote parts of the world.
Right.
I mean,
that's just
the craziest cool thing there ever was. And we were just sitting there joking like, okay, so how did this get started? And so in my mind, I'm thinking was probably a bunch of dudes in California playing with radio-controlled airplanes.
Yeah.
They were trying to deliver a bag of something to this guy on the other side of the block.
Hey, man.
Yeah.
Send it over.
And then what happened was they didn't have enough money to put fuel in it, so they put it on a slingshot.
Yeah, true.
Had a glider.
And think about it. And these are the guys that come up with these $1 million companies.
Yeah. Overnight.
Just stuff like that. And that's what I love about the creativity curve is you're sitting there and, there's a lot of technology that gets into it once the idea is born. But that initial step is usually somebody doing something stupid, funny, or just out of the box.
True.
And it develops into this fantastic
thing.
It
hits you in the head, and you're like, holy crap, that's a great idea. I could actually do that.
Yeah.
So the lazier you are,
the
lazier you become, the more it fits into technology.
That's true.
It makes technology easier.
Well, and if you do look at the progression of technology, I find this interesting. Having, like I said, I think I've been on it since the cusp of civilian use of technology.
Well, and you're fortunate because your age group.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I fall within that age range. Is the only reason why, I think. But it's interesting, when you first started using technology, it was difficult and specialized. And now technology's almost gotten, whether it's your phone, whether it's a computer, whether it's, anything, apps, Facebook, whatever. They make it easier and easier, and they actually dumb it down.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're going to end up with a smaller collective of people that actually know what's going on, and you're going to end up with a wide group. In the beginning, you had a fairly large group, my segment of the population, that if you were in that field, you knew what was going on. You know what I'm saying? You knew it took code to write this. They probably wrote it in Pascal or C or C++.
Wow.
Whatever.
Fortran, all that stuff.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You knew, you had this general knowledge of what was going on and how it was done. Whereas now you're ending up with users that are getting an end product and they don't know how it's getting there. They're just that's why there's really a death of the PC going on right now. At some point, everything's going to be a tablet. You're going to have a dumb terminal basically that ties into the internet, and everything happens on the internet. And I think people are going to lose some of the ability to maybe create, maybe not be so creative, but it's going to become it's a tighter group. Are you tracking?
I definitely track with that, because I remember when I first started using, everything was line commands off of C.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
You had to do everything with line command, so you literally had to learn how to interface with your computer. Now that you have this system that sits over it, and it's basically picture or graphics driven, the biggest part of the computer problem nowadays is the graphics, the size of the graphics, and the requirement of the user. Because I can tell you, we're one step away from 3D holograms interface. We're just that close. And it's funny because that will stifle probably the masses, but you'll have a groundswell of technological rebels that will come up with the next neatest, latest, and greatest thing.
There'll always be somebody out there chasing that. But I think in the 90s, I think you had probably one of the largest demographics of my age group that understood what was going on, and I think that's steadily shrinking.
Well, that's profiteering taking over.
It is.
What it basically
it's
becomes.
Monetization, and we want to present a package.
Sure.
Here's a pretty package. Take the package.
Right, because you can look at this. You can say, okay, the PC's no good. Well, what if I have an RFID chip now in my arm?
Yeah.
What if I have an implant interface in my arm that allows me to go off of what I'm thinking?
Sure.
Because you've seen the technology out there. So you can basically interact with your watch. You can track you wherever you're at.
Your phone. I mean, your phone's really replaced the PC to a large degree.
So your phone has, but you can set your phone and walk away from it.
You can.
But if you tether it to the human,
yes,
and I order a Subway sandwich and it comes flying via drone, it lands at my table and feeds me at the table.
Now, so when this emerging technology comes to light, it's because some focus group has been conducted that said, "Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
This technology that you're doing, yes, let me have it. I would love to have this." So it's not like something that's come along and it has become intrusive. People have allowed it to enter their lives.
That's exactly the point I'm making.
Because they extract from it some good that will make their life easier in some way.
Well, we always want to do that. Initially, you look at the convenience. But you have to always keep in mind that there's an exploiter factor to all this stuff.
Yeah, that's another business model that somebody's following.
It is.
I was neither attaching good nor evil
to
what I was saying. Yeah. I'm just saying that is the flow of the river. That's how we ended up here.
Because how I look at it is people who, and I have actually family members who are, maybe a little bit younger than me, maybe some that are a little bit older, who have resisted technology for various reasons. There one of the articles that we posted up when we were trying to research this whole thing was some of the things what prevents the aged, let's just call it that, from grasping technology or adapting or adopting it. And they had various barriers, some disadvantages or concerns about the technology, or they just flat out said, I don't see a need for it. And, to me, how I equated that was, I'm afraid of it. I'm just not going to tell you I'm afraid of it. I just don't see that it fits in my life in some way.
Or I'm just so damn old I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I'm just tired of this shit. I won't do it.
I'm not learning something.
What I thought was fascinating about this study or this focus group was once all of the concerns were addressed for all of these people and not adapting to or adopting technology, at the very end, once we've explained, here's how this technology helps you in whatever capacity will in your life, are you less likely or more likely to use the tablet? With at
this point, they'll drive you into the tablet.
Well, okay,
you won't have a choice.
Yeah.
But the thing is in this study, these people, without being prompted, they were like, I absolutely see value in this technology. It tells me what's going on with my kids. It tells me what's going on with my grandkids. I'm not looking at it from...
Well, if you look at television advertising, though, that's all they show you. They show you can...
I was going to say, do you think you're driven towards it to a degree?
Yes.
Do they drive... In other words, is it a marketing scheme to get you to like it? They make it
so attractive to not have it.
So
everything's convenience.
Yeah.
You got Ring, you got Nest. You can check on your pets at work.
Right.
I've actually got both of those.
You can check on your kids at daycare. I mean, they have done a good job of packaging this.
To change people's behavior?
Yes.
Okay, so part of this conversation yesterday went into the 24-hour news cycle, which we're kind of getting off of our topic here, but since we've addressed how somebody can get you to change your behavior in some way, we went into the 24-hour news cycle where when I was growing up, the news, when I watched it,
came on at 6 o'clock.
Well, yes, 6 and 10, and usually the topics were breaking down as, here's what's going on nationally, maybe a world event. And most of the time here's what's going on locally, and then you got your sports and your weather, and you're done.
Yeah,
that's it.
But most of the time you knew about what was going on locally, so you might hear about a robbery or a shooting or something, and it would be like a onesie or a twosie showing up on your local news. The moment the 24-hour news cycle came along, now you were hearing about the murders and the shootings that were happening Chicago, not only in just your location, but across the nation.
Right.
So now all of a sudden,
globally now.
Now all of a sudden, you only were hearing about the onesies and twosies, and now you've got whole volumes and tomes of these events.
But that's all due to technology as well.
Again, now you've been bombarded with all this information. So now what are you going to do? I'm going to change my behavior because I've been bombarded with information. Okay, how does it relate to you locally? Well, it's the information that happened locally is still local.
Yeah.
Does whatever somebody's doing in fucking Chicago or New York affect me here in Houston? Fuck no.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
No. So am I going to change my behavior? No. So that's where I was going with this whole information thing.
So I hear what you're saying, but also you have to remember they know what they're doing when they do that. They're shaping opinions,
right,
with news
slowly and surely
across the country.
But what I'm getting at is they're telling you who were doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because you've got this new information, you start adopting new habits that you didn't do before,
and you're also developing new thoughts, and they're breaking barriers in many ways. They're breaking down your resistance to what your little world allows you to live in.
Right.
And they're giving you what's called the global perspective.
Yes.
And so what they do is it's funny, it's like a double shame. Okay, shame on me for being so naive, and shame on me for not feeling compassionate towards the story they just put out there.
Right.
This is where you have to really watch what they do with the news. Because technology, with all the good we talk about, this is where it starts becoming manipulative. Because they tend to make you feel like, wow, I didn't realize I was living under a rock all these years. And now I got all this access.
Right.
So what happens?
Yes.
You're like a kid in a candy store at this point. When you first hit, everybody we've dealt with that's experienced with new technology, parents, kids, whoever it is, it's overload. It's sugar rush.
Yeah.
We're all like bouncing off the walls.
Right.
How many times have you played a video game or a new technology and stayed on it and realized you just lost 12 hours of your life?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Guilty.
It happens all the time. And they know this. Those study groups know this stuff. And so they know their limits, but they also have gotten really good at just knowing how to place things. And they place it for convenience. They want you to feel like, oh man, this is the latest and greatest. This is the way everybody else is. This is how they are in California. This is how they are in New York. How come your little part of the world isn't like this?
Right.
Well, we're bringing it to you. And that's how they sold cable TV in.
Sure.
You know, oh, why, what 3 channels? We're going to open the world to you. I mean, that to me,
That's funny. That was actually a commercial.
It was.
From the cable company. Yeah. Trying to think what cable company that was. It was a show on advertisement and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching on the History Channel, and that's exactly how they marketed cable. Is exactly how you just said it right there.
It opens the universe to you.
Yeah,
it's your house. I mean, smart TVs. So we have smartphones, but look at our televisions.
Right.
The smart TV is actually the coolest thing on the planet.
Yeah, I love my smart TV.
I will say, but I'm also the guy that's unplugging that stuff when I go to bed. I just am. In my mind,
yeah.
Right.
Because the way I think of things, I look at the intrusion of it. I know that for all the good that comes out of it, there's some dude sitting in a cave somewhere. I know, you can look at me because that's just how I think. And there's some dude in the cave somewhere who says, oh, I wonder what they're doing in his house tonight.
I wonder why Ken unplugged his TV.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just not that interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm not either. I just want to take away the ability to do that.
I agree.
I am
I
so
get
funny
it.
about that.
No, I get it.
But no, I think it's interesting because people that I would have never thought would gravitate towards smart technology are now doing this. I have a friend, he's 80. They're in their 80s. They're like 80, 85, and they're rural Missourians. Okay? And they grew up through the Depression, the military, all the things that they've done. They've raised kids. Never touched technology until the grandkids came along.
Yes.
To your point earlier. So it's funny, now they're very active on social media. And now we're texting and talking continually.
Yeah.
And what's funny is all the little things on social media that attracts them are all the nostalgia things. So I'm always getting a post from days of yesterday. Do you remember this? And it shows a typewriter. And it cracks me up to see how many people don't know what a typewriter is.
Right.
You know, and it just all the funny stuff that they put on the internet that you just go, okay, that's cool. How did you not know that was there?
Well, the fact that you can take a photo from, so far away, from so many years ago, and then present it in present day,
right? And
some people, because I even look at those photos, and because we have loads of photo albums at home. My mom is a consummate photo collector, so
right.
that's out of all of her possessions, those are the things that when they're gone, that'll be the her most treasured thing that I'll make sure I safeguard.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to pass that on.
That's the history.
to the next generation.
What's funny about that technology is that it used to be volumes of photo albums and boxes of loose photos.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we still have those.
Yeah, you still have those, but look at what's on the phone now. When you lose your phone, it's not the contacts you're worried about, it's the pictures. It's all the photos that I've taken on my phone that I did not download. So it's funny how that has displaced photos, basically. So now everything's a digital photo.
Yes. There's no hard copy of
No hard
something.
copies of them anymore, which I think is pretty interesting because that's another industry that has been completely displaced.
Oh, the film, yeah. I mean, Kodak's almost broke.
Yeah, there's Polaroid, Kodak.
Polaroid is broke.
Yeah, there's none of that left. But what I think is funny, we were talking about technology. I messed around on Google Earth a lot. And the one thing I didn't realize is you can go in there to the view and change it to historical image. And you can actually move the timeline back over any specific geographical area. And if there was ever a map made, it would be in that Google survey.
Whether it was a recon or satellite or whatever.
A lot of them would say U.S. Army on there. And so I was going back as far as 1944 in our neighborhood here. Which
Cow
was,
pasture.
Yeah, it was very cool to go back and just zoom that timeline back. And so you would have had to go to a library somewhere that harbored these thousands of boxes of files that you'd have to rummage through these maps. And looking at a map is nowhere near as cool as looking at a really high resolution picture on your computer.
That allows for zoom.
Yeah. It's just amazing. And so I think it's fun. That's some of the things that I noticed with fishermen because I fish a lot. And a guy turned me onto that. He goes, "Hey, look at the lake in 2001 when they had the record lows." So we would get on Google Earth and look at the lake and look at creeks and streams and structure in the lake that is now covered with water.
Wow.
And I'm like, you couldn't have done that.
No. You'd had no way to do that.
And how many... So at the lake, we were fishing a tournament this last weekend, and if there wasn't one, there was 10 dudes in their 60s and 70s looking at these maps, sitting at a coffee shop before they went out to the lake.
That's crazy.
When would you have ever expected to see a guy do that? Never. Because they would say, "Oh, it's Google Map. What's Google?"
Yeah.
Google sounds like something my kid makes noise of. So, it's just funny to see these old dudes with their iPads. An iPad! Looking at a Google Map in a coffee shop. That just cracked me up. I was like, whoa, this has really gotten big.
And it's so to my point about, having family members that resist technology and how even as it's constantly emerging, how they resist it, don't use it, because they in some way they think that because they don't use it, that their usage is in some way going to make this technology, this platform, somehow irrelevant, and it's basically going to close up shop and go away just because you, so and so, whoever you are, refuse to use our technology. And I just equated up to, you're Don Quixote, only you don't fucking know it. You're the guy that's sitting there going, I'm gonna sit here and fight to make sure that the next sunset, the next sunrise, the seasons of change don't happen.